Gerald, before we get to Pope Francis and his views, I just want you to sort of describe for me a little bit about the history of the Vatican Bank, because many people may not know about its existence and what it does and how it came about.
No, and Pim, you know, they think of Pope Francis, they see him and they think of him just as head of a religion, but he's also representing the head of a nation, the Vatican City, and they've had a bank for 70 years. They formed it in the middle of World War II, and it's just had decades of scandals. Before he came into power, it practiced often what he calls savage capitalism. It was a place for money launderers, a depository for people who wanted to avoid taxes. It did business with the Nazis in World War II. The head of the Vatican Bank, the equivalent of Yellen and the Fed, got indicted. He was a bishop in the 80s. The Italians couldn't extradite him because he hid inside Vatican City. So it's a bad history. And in comes Francis, and the question is this Pope, who says that capitalism has its extremes and should be somewhat restrained, going to do something about his own bank, the central bank inside Vatican City, which has been over the line so many times?
What has he done? Because he has shaken up the bank in the sense that he's launched a major investigation into the way the bank operates. Tell us about his relationship with the Vatican Bank.
So in some ways, he's taking the Vatican into the 21st century of modern finances, kicking and screaming. But he has no choice. The Vatican started to use the euro at the turn of the century, and that meant that Brussels and the European Union were going to require that the central bank, the Vatican Bank, met international standards. So the Vatican said, what? We have to meet international standards.
Like an annual report.
Like an annual report, but even better. In 2011, they passed their first ever, 2,000-year-old institution, they passed their first ever law against money laundering. Never had one. In 2011, they passed their first law against the financing of international terrorism. Never had one. They passed in 2012 a limit of how much cash you could bring into the city-state, 10,000 euros now. Never had it. You used to be able to bring in as much as you could carry with your two arms in a suitcase. So he is reforming it, but he has no choice. But to his credit, he's doing it with some enthusiasm, meaning that he's bringing in outsiders. He's not giving it to clerics and a few monsignors that are dragging their feet and don't know what they're doing, as in the past, but he's bringing in good outside experts.
I wanted to mention one of the outside experts having come from Invesco, correct?
Yes, that's right. He's brought in the Wall Street people in some ways that he castigates at times, but he's brought in in each instance.
This is just a name, Jean-Baptiste de François.
He is now head of the Vatican Bank. He's the layman running the Vatican Bank. Every layman who comes in, Pope Francis picks, is a good Catholic. So the one restriction is there's nothing in the rule of the Vatican Bank that says you can't work there unless you're Catholic. But they're all devout Catholics for the most part, who also happen to be very successful businessmen. And they're coming in and really trying to clean it up. I think they're doing a pretty good job of it. But that's not to say, I know that there are 2 criminal investigations in Italy right now looking at whether there had been some money laundering issues back before Francis became Pope in 2013. Those may develop into criminal cases going forward.
Talk about cases. What about cases that could be in some way amplified by the release of documents that are held in the archives of the Vatican Bank?
Francis, let's say Francis is a reformer for the Vatican Bank going forward. The question I've raised a number of times publicly, just recently in the Washington Post in an op-ed, will he be a reformer going backwards into history? And by that I mean, will he release the World War II files of the Vatican Bank and the Vatican itself? There are questions, some of which I raise in my book, about the extent to which the Vatican profited from investments with German and Italian insurance companies during the war. And the bank was created in the middle of that. It raises issues of restitution back to victims. Will the Vatican release that? Will this Pope have the courage or political capital to do so? I don't know. You just mentioned a moment ago that right now he's at the 9/11 Memorial in a multi-denominational meeting. There are nearly 100 representatives, Jewish rabbis, members of the Jewish faith there. Will they raise the issue of the Holocaust files with him? I don't think so, but I'd like to see him get pushed a little bit. He might be the Pope capable of setting them free.